Okay, can we please call the meeting to order?
Mrs. De Silva,
Here.
Mrs. Rigby,
Here.
and Mr. Melody.
Here. Okay, for Pledge of Allegiance, I will lead everyone in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight, so please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes for the July 7th meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, questions or comments? Okay, please call the roll.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
and Mr. Melody.
Yes, motion passes 3-0. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented tonight for August the 8th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
and Mr. Melody.
Yes, motion passes 3-0.
Mr. Starkey.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to bring up Mr. Matt Perro, principal of Kaufman High School, to recognize some of our student athletes tonight.
Dr. Marshausen, Board of Education, thank you for your continued support and recognition of all the wonderful things that occur here in the Dublin City Schools. Our esports team here at Kaufman High School is a great example of what makes Kaufman such a special place. Our esports athletes have put countless hours in practice and preparation to succeed in their matches. The continued flow of state championships has been quite impressive, and it wouldn't be possible without their talents, hard work, and dedication. Allow me to both introduce John Richardson, and a huge congratulations to both him and his student athletes, if they could all come forward.
Board of Education, Dr. Marshausen, thank you for having us here. Having you here again, really appreciate. First want to say thank you to all the people who allowed us to be here. Principal Perro, again, for his continued support to support us in our building, our Kaufman, and set that culture and support us to be able to be together and work together. I'd like to thank the families of all the players and my family as well to kind of support us and give us this opportunity to be here and have this great experience of another wonderful season here. Kaufman Esports, we ran 9 different teams this year, which was a lot, and we had 61 different students participating at Kaufman, which I would say is bigger than even some of the sports that are at Kaufman. And we had several make the playoffs, and we had a couple make the state finals, including our Valorant team here, where we were able to. This was the first year that we actually, Esports Ohio was able to set up an in-person state championship. We met at the University of Akron. Schools from across the state. There were 45 schools that came in. Well, after the season narrowed down to 45 schools, came in, and it was quite a sight. It was a fantastic experience, and I was not just proud of the guys on how they performed, which I'll talk about in a second, but I was extremely proud of the guys on how they represented Dublin Kaufman and Dublin schools. They came in professional, made friends, talked to other schools. Even other schools after a win would come up and ask for tips and pointers, and they would be more than willing to sit down with them and talk to them and cheer on other schools, and just made friendships and met other coaches and were respectful. And I'm very proud to be part of the district that was able to kind of mold these guys and give them this opportunity to do this. It was a wonderful experience. These guys worked so many hours and worked so hard. I've been gaming most of my life since my Atari back as a little kid, and at the same time, as someone who's had many, many years of gaming, seeing what they can do and their skill, it takes more than just spending a lot of time playing games. It's a real skill, especially at the level that these gentlemen play at. It is quite extraordinary. On top of that, the amount of teamwork, strategy that they have to work through. I mean, not only did I've gamed my whole life, I played sports my whole life, and this is a sport. This is a sport, and the one thing I would want, that I would hate to have people walk away, is just these are kids just playing video games together. These are kids taking real life skills. Most of the time, these guys don't even know each other going into the school or into a team, and they work together. They go through the highs and lows. We started this season with a loss to Jerome, unfortunately. That was rough. That was rough. Who was kind of our biggest rivals, and they overcame that adversity. They got better. They push each other, carry each other when they're down, and push them when they're doing well to be better. All the things I remember growing up and playing sports and those skills and leadership, it's just an extraordinary experience. And so I'm grateful here. I'm grateful to be part of a district like this, and I just want to make sure that everyone understands how hard these guys work and how great they are. We have Eli Cranston, Ethan Park, Colin Kuhn, and Snehal Patel. And unfortunately, Sam Baker couldn't be here tonight, but these guys put on a heck of an effort. And I hope to see Dublin schools continue to support our esports program, because it's become a wonderful place where a lot of people who don't feel like they can play football or basketball, or afraid to join a student council, or don't feel like they can do NHS, but they like games. They feel welcome here. I've seen many, many friendships develop in our game lab, and I'm so proud of that. So thank you very much for having us tonight, and congratulations again, guys. Oh, yeah, no, follow me.
At this time, I'd like to invite Mrs. Christy Venny to the podium to share where we are on our strategic planning timeline and the work that we have moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Marshausen. Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to share with you where we're at in our process with strategic planning. We're about to embark on the visioning phase of our process, and this is where we're going to define a concept and create a plan that will guide our growth and prosperity in the district for years to come. This process, this is the first time in decades that we're going to be engaging in creating a strategic plan, and it truly has the potential to transform our district. It's vital that this plan is going to include the values and aspirations and shared sentiment of our entire district. This is going to include a variety of engagement opportunities, both internal and externally, to ensure that the direction and our vision reflects all perspectives. And we're going to look at the timeline tonight, and I'll go backwards a little bit to start. If you remember, back in May, we began this process with the board retreat, and we held after that, after getting the vision from our Board of Education, then we held 6 meetings with key stakeholders in our community, and that included our Business Advisory Council, our building PTO leadership, the Student Advisory Committee, the Senior Citizen Council, and our key communicator team. So we gathered all of their feedback and input and ideas, and there were some really unique ideas we never would have come up with had we not sat down and really had a thorough, in-depth conversation. There were also things that were consistent between groups, which were really helpful to guide our thinking. We collected many, many pages of notes, and we've been going through that information, and we're moving into that next phase where you'll see on our timeline we have community engagement coming up here in the fall. We really want our community to know as we engage in this that this is your district. And it's whether you have a student in the district or if you've attended the district yourself, you just live in the district, everyone provides a unique perspective. And we want to ensure that all the ideas and feedback we gather will be reflected as we move forward with creating our plan. And you'll notice on here, you'll see that there's going to be another retreat after we gather all that information. And then this process is going to run all throughout the year, and our goal is to conclude in the spring. So it's going to be a year-long process that'll end with another board retreat. That's when we'll finalize the plan. The engagement portion is going to target our larger community, and it's going to gather the insight, as I mentioned. We're going to have a survey that we're working on finalizing right now that hopefully we will be able to target through multiple strategies. So we're going to use media assets, so that will include both online and print. We were looking to get news coverage and do some press releases on this. We really want to raise awareness this is happening so that folks can engage with us. There will be information on our district website about the process, and it'll include our timeline and how to be involved. And then we're also going to utilize our social media platforms. So we have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. There's others we can consider. And we'll look at how we can really make sure those posts get out to all of the audiences. And then, of course, email is another channel that we'll utilize. Where our goal is to finalize the survey in the next week or so, and hopefully start distributing that the week of August 22nd. So there'll be a window of time where that's open and that we're using all of these channels to engage. Also, you'll see on the slide, this is going to include our student voice. So 6th grade and up students will be involved. Then we'll have our district and an internal survey, and then the public surveys. Anyone living in the district boundaries, any community members. And we'll continue to update you throughout the process. Any questions?
Just a quick question. So with the survey, it starts on August 22nd. How long is the survey portion?
The window?
Yeah, the window.
I believe we were going to aim for about a month, a little over a month for that process.
Thank you.
And planning next, who will be doing this for us, we will also have paper pencil copies for people who may not have access to an internet device, and it will be available in multiple languages for anyone who would like to get it in their native language.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for the update. All right, public participation for items on the agenda. There is no one signed up this evening. Board of Education committees or updates?
I have something just really quickly. So I mentioned, I think at the last meeting or maybe the one before that, there was an OSBA liaison, like student achievement meeting that was supposed to happen on August 10th. It's been canceled, and I guess they're going to try to reschedule it, but I don't have a date for that. But there is the OSBA Central Region Legislative Open House at Tolles. So I don't think I'll be able to make that, but if anyone is interested in attending, it's on August 23rd from 6, starts at 6:30 and goes until 8, I think. So if you don't have the registration link, I can send that to you.
Yeah, I know I saw an email on that today, so we'll make sure we can try to get someone there to cover. All right, any other committee updates? I would just like to thank the board members and administrators and everyone from the district that spent time at the Irish Festival this weekend representing the district, so thank you. All right, superintendent comments. Dr. Marshausen.
Thank you, Mr. Melody. A couple things as we get going for the start of this new school year. The hashtag The Dublin Difference has served us well as a community for a period of time. But as we move forward and as we embrace a new strategic vision and as we look at a specific and focused approach to our culture and our culture handbook, We'll be using 3 different hashtags this year, each of which is based on one of our core values. Prepared for success, always growing, and better together. Also on the first day, we will once again use DCS Day 1 for our back-to-school posts. So our goal here is an alignment, and our goal is to focus on those values and moving forward. So as you see things that we post on social media, you will not see coming from anyone on our team that hashtag Dublin difference anymore, as we kind of turn a page and move forward with an aligned focus with our vision and our culture and the work that we're doing there. At a meeting in June, we had a group of students approach us about adding Eid to our district calendar. And one of the things that I took away and our team took away from that is the fact that we are such a diverse community that there are significant opportunities for us to do better in celebrating the great diversity that we have. And that became quite evident quickly after that presentation when representatives from our Jewish community reached out and said, if you're going to consider Eid, we'd like you to consider Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And then we had folks from our Christian community reach out and said, not in this year, but in the next 2 calendars, we have school on Good Friday, and we have school on other Christian holidays. And at one of our community coffees, there was a representative from one of the businesses that talked about the fact that in their company, they provide religious holidays for the people of those religions, and the rest of the workers come to school on those days, so that there are floating religious holidays that allow people to celebrate their religions. And it got me thinking about one of our Parent Diversity Committee meetings where it was held during Ramadan, and one of our participants had to leave as we approached sundown. And as a district, we can and we must do better at recognizing the great diversity of religions that we have while celebrating with our families and looking at this from a more district-wide perspective. Last fall, I held a meeting of faith-based leaders that we brought together as the new superintendent, and we had 25 faith-based leaders that sat down and met with me about the different faith traditions in our community. What I will be doing is having those faith-based leaders come in again in the fall, and I would like to identify the highest holy days in all of the religions that are celebrated in the Dublin City School District. I believe we should put together a list. I think we should create an attendance code for religious absences so that we can track those absences by religion so that there are no penalties or consequences. We should also publish a list of those high holy days and say there will be no assignments on that day or on the following day when we come back to school, so that it allows all of our students that opportunity. We have a calendar committee that meets, and we will start meeting to look at the 25-26 calendar sometime this fall. And the reason we get so far in advance is we want the parents of the class of 26, which are our incoming freshmen, to know when all of the events will be during their senior year, as they may plan a bit in advance. As that calendar committee meets and we work with our associations, 2 of the days also that fall into that are the comp days for parent-teacher conferences that we work with our Teachers Association to plan. We have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity to allow everyone to celebrate. The other piece of this is, in such an economically diverse community, we are mindful that every day we take off school, our families who have one working parent or where both parents work are in a position where, when it's not a federal holiday, our lowest socioeconomic families are impacted the greatest. And any day that we take off school that's not in those traditional time frames, a parent has to make a decision to either leave their child home alone, to take off work themselves, or to pay for childcare. And with this type of proposal where we allow flexibility for families to celebrate their traditions, but continue to have our school for the students who may not celebrate those traditions, it allows us to be consistent for family life. The other piece of this, and I've been asked, well, what does that mean around the winter holidays where we take off 2 weeks? There's a social compact that we have with our communities. We've learned during COVID that the tradition of school and how our calendar is in a cyclical process is what people are used to. Another part of that is pre-COVID, and now especially as we hopefully exit this, those 2 weeks around the federal holidays and at the end of our semester allow us to clean our buildings. I know Mr. Stark and his team do the buses and do deep cleaning of our buildings, and that break in there is also something that allows for all of those things to take place. So I'll take any questions from board members or any thoughts from board members at this time. Our commitment is that we will bring our faith-based leaders together. We will get a group together to identify those holidays. We'll get them published for our teachers, and as soon as we have concrete plans in place, we will share those with our communities about floating holidays.
Just a quick question of when will you be convening the religious leaders to put together the list of holidays?
As soon as Janet and I get together to identify a date on our calendar and get invitations out and allow people to come back together, that's what we'll do.
Okay, great, yeah. For the record, I love that idea of having input from community members and religious leaders so that we actually know what the important holidays are for the people in our community.
Yeah, I think I shared with the board a list from one of the state departments that had 50 different religious holidays. What are the holidays that are the high holidays in each of the religious traditions? And so that we can recognize those and provide our students a stress-free opportunity to celebrate with their families.
So with that, do you anticipate there being 2 floating holidays per faith? Or, I mean, how are you looking at this?
Well, right now my thought would be 2, but I think I have to meet with our faith leaders first to see what days there are, what religions have what different traditions, where they fall within our school year. I know in some faith traditions the holidays would move through our traditional 12-month calendar because they're based on a lunar calendar. We'll see and identify what those are.
Okay, and overall, just in terms of thinking of the teacher perspective, do you foresee this being more complicated because there will be more days overall that they have to accommodate for, no assignments or no tests the next day?
Well, I think that's why getting with the faith leaders together and putting things up where we can have a discussion about what are those days and to see how many days there are and what they look like. Yeah, it's going to be a little work on our end, but I also think it's something that as we celebrate our diversity and we want everyone to feel comfortable here, something that we have an opportunity to do.
And then just a comment, once those holidays are identified, I assume we will publish them as part of either the district calendar or the student handbook, something along those lines?
Yeah, I think right now it would be something that I would bring to the board and we would post on the website, and then in future student handbooks, they would be posted in those handbooks along with the attendance policies that go along with those. There are some things that we can do just to be mindful. For example, coming up, Ramadan will fall in the middle of state testing season. And we don't have flexibility when the state tests are, but I do think we can make sure that any tests or assessments are given in the morning. I think that at our high school level, we probably should be giving flexibility for our Muslim students to potentially take some tests or quizzes before school if they're in a class at the end of the school day. There are some things that we can do to be respectful and to understand the different traditions that on our end would allow everyone to be more comfortable and would be showing an understanding and respect for different religious traditions. As we look at where we are in terms of staffing, and we compare staffing from one year to the next, as we continue to see growth in our numbers and growth in our community, I've asked Mr. Boney and his team to share some staffing numbers. So I'm going to turn over the next couple slides in my presentation to Brian, and then as we look at the increases in large part due to some student services and special ed needs, Mr. Andrus will also jump in to talk about these things. So, Brian, I have the clicker. When you want me to go to the next one, just tell me.
All right. Good evening, members of the board. Wanted just to share, and we've talked a lot about hiring and what's happening within hiring in Dublin City Schools, and so the next few slides do some kind of capturing at different points in time. And so the slide that's up right now shows staffing headcounts across the entire district. So the 2204 was an FTE snapshot that we took in 2021, and that includes certified staff, administrative staff, classified staff, and then where we were in 2022 at a similar point in time. And so the numbers would not necessarily reflect when you have resignations that haven't been filled yet, but it gives you a sense of where we are today. So 2227 is kind of a quick snapshot of those staff members who represent all groups in Dublin City Schools. Next slide. One of the things that when we look at growth in our district, so just on the right-hand side of the screen is a list of student growth, and those different colored circles represent elementary at the top, middle school is the second one, the dark blue is high school, I apologize, it's a little bit hard to read, and then DCS virtual on the bottom. The gray circles that are the largest on the right bottom represent those student numbers that corresponds to the numbers of students between 2020 and 2022. One of the interesting things on this slide is the hiring in 2021. And so we hired about 100 new staff members in the certified area in 2021. And we had a couple of big events. One was Eversole Run Middle School, opening that building. So you'll see our middle school numbers in 2021 were fairly high. You'll also see where it says elementary and it says IS and support. That number is a little bit high because we brought back our media specialist during 2021. And then if you look down at DCS virtual in 2021, we also had a lot of hiring. This year, we are hiring about 35 new staff members, and as Mr. Andrus and I talked about, probably 3/4 of the hiring that we've done for this year are in the IS and then support areas within student support services. Probably have 8 or 9 positions that are core positions that we're hiring this year. We were able to take those individuals that were DCS virtual, we're seeing smaller numbers for this year, and then bring them back into the classroom then for 2022. This slide just shows where are we in 2021, where are we today. And so in 2021, we added 100 certified positions. Sort of interesting to see that there's almost an equal split between our core area in 2021 and then our IS and support areas. And then our administrative numbers, we added 7 new administrative staff last year. If you move over to the right side in 2022, we're adding 35 positions, and you can see the difference. About 3/4 of those are in student support services. And even though the administrative number shows 5, one of the things that we talk about is this idea that, getting people into the right seats and making sure that we have the right administrators in place. And Dr. Marshausen and I were just recently talking about that this has probably been, at least in the time that I've been in Dublin and having been in other districts, the least amount of turnover and movement in the administrative areas. And so those positions that we've added have been for support positions. So for example, we've added a position to be an assistant coordinator in transportation. We've hired somebody to help with custodial services. And so most of those positions represent support in the district as opposed to lots of movement in our administrative ranks.
Okay, Mr. Andrus, you're up.
So student services is usually just thought of as special education, gifted, EL, mental health, and physical health. But on this slide and tonight, I'm simply going to talk about special education, and even more specifically, students with disabilities and intervention specialists. So what the slide that you'll see here, on the left is a snapshot of the past few years, and it's the average ratio of students with disabilities and intervention specialists. I believe that having a ratio of under 12 at elementary and middle is the right place to start a school year, because as the school year progresses, we always add students. We find kids, we identify them, and we serve them. I believe at the high school level, we had some work to do when I got here a few years ago in terms of making sure that kids were more independent and had more opportunities to succeed at the high school level by not having maybe as much, what somebody might say, as much support. But knowing that there's a good balance of everything. We have kids that are ready to graduate high school and go on to life after high school, and there's not necessarily a single person there to support them. So we want to make sure that we're giving them opportunities to be independent. And that's where you'll see high school student ratios were a little bit above 12, and they're about 16. Now, I think it's important to remember every child is different, and we absolutely take a look at these numbers, but the more important part is also the needs of the individual student. We like to find balance, and some of the ratios that I'm going to talk about just briefly are outlined in Ohio Administrative Code, so it's not something that we can have too much flexibility about. But the top number of 1,683 was taken about February of 2018, and 2391 was where we ended this summer after some identification. So we've had quite a bit of growth in that period of time. And the overall ratio, if you look at those two circles, you'll see that in 17-18, we had an average of about 11.65, and this is pre-K through 12. And because we've increased at the high school, but we've decreased in those earlier grade levels, we've actually gone up as a district in our overall ratio, while still, I believe, meeting the needs of each individual student with a disability across the board. We live in a great, great community that, at least as long as I've been here, and I'm sure well before that, has taken pride in supporting individuals with disabilities and including them in activities. I think we are absolutely a destination district for parents of children with disabilities who want high levels of service, and we're fortunate to be able to do that while also keeping in mind that there are ways that we can be more efficient and yet also be more effective. And so I like to think when you look at that ratio at the bottom, that is absolutely not showing a decrease in service. I would argue for our earliest learners, kids who are struggling right out of the gate with reading and math, with executive skills, with behavior, we're able to take those resources and put them at an earlier stage in elementary and middle to prepare them for success at the high school level. I'm happy to answer any questions about ODE ratios, like how a speech therapist can have 80 school-age students but only 50 preschool kids, or how an intervention specialist at a certain level can only have 6 students with autism on their caseload, or 8 kids with multiple disabilities, but there's a multiple category part where you can serve 8 kids with multiple disabilities and 6 kids with autism in the same classroom. Of course, we wouldn't do that, but the ratios are very complex. And I'm happy to go into any detail that anybody would want about that, or just about the simple parts on this slide.
Chris, just as a point of reference, every year at the end of the school year, we kind of anticipate how many students will move in over the summer or where our numbers will be. We talked briefly. Can you share some of the things that have happened this summer that we've had to respond to as the events around us have changed?
Yeah, one of the biggest ones is we had a very high number of special education referrals that happened in May. And the law says once you have a referral, if the district chooses to evaluate, we have to make that decision within 30 days. And if we say, yes, we're going to evaluate, we have to conduct an evaluation within 60 days. And then we have to have an IEP if the child qualifies within 30 days. So when we have a referral in April or May, what that means is we have a lot of work in a short period of time that has to happen over the summer. This summer, as far as I'm concerned, was one of the busiest summers for special education assessments and IEP meetings and making sure services are in place for students when they show up on the first day of school. Made me extremely nervous, and our staff stepped up and absolutely crushed it. I'm so proud of what we did this summer. But that is a lot of kids with disabilities that we, projection-wise, we hadn't projected. I think we came in a little lower the year before, and I think this year, coming off of what we've been through the past few years, we caught a lot of kids this year. Now we've found them, we've got the services that they need, and we're ready to move forward. But we did anticipate a couple extra hires, and the numbers are still coming in. We also have a high number of parents who are moving into the district. And so I'm thinking about one in elementary in particular, who in one day had 4 new students. When you think of a ratio, an average ratio across the district of 12, a couple more move-ins like that, and they're going to maybe require a whole nother intervention specialist just based off of move-ins on a single day during the summer. We're happy to have anybody that moves in, and we'll provide them great service.
I have a question. So obviously you want to identify students early. How much does this fluctuate during the school year?
Usually, the elementary numbers go from a little under 12 on average to about 14. Middle school goes from about 12 to 13, and high school stays relatively flat. It's important to remember that students with disabilities, they are identified, but every 3 years they have a reevaluation. And it is possible for a child who have received great services, both in general ed and special ed, and they no longer qualify based off of the eligibility definition. So we do have some students that exit over the course of the year. Most of the time that's at the secondary level. But elementaries are tough. Some years, some of our elementaries, they increase right where we think that they should, and other years they have significantly more, and it's hard to predict. I remember a year when Ms. Schwanke at Indian Run had a lot of students one year and hardly any the next, and it just depends on the year and the students and their needs. But overall at the elementary level, we always grow, and we're always looking around January or February for additional help to maintain those ratios.
And our special ed team has done a phenomenal job coming out of those very disrupted COVID years, because there may have been some students who were not identified because we may not have seen them as often, or they may have been in a period where you see them every other day, and we're still playing catch up with some of those students to make sure that we're able to provide the services we need, and Chris and his team do a phenomenal job. Thank you both very much. Another area that we talk about is senior leadership, and this is an example. Well, this is our organizational chart. We've made some changes to our organizational chart that I believe allow us to effectively lead the district in different areas. One of the important changes is the shifting in our academic team and the shifting in responsibilities for Dr. Bailey, who is now the Executive Director of Equity and Student Success. In this role, we will focus on providing a personal and individual education to every student based on specific data that we're looking at, Dr. Bailey will lead our district DEI teams. She will also lead the transition for them to our diversity team. She will lead the Parent Diversity Committee. And she will be working with the leadership here at Emerald Campus as we look at what those success pathways look like moving forward. When we look at our strategic vision and our planning and where that work's going, and what the new requirements are for us as a district to look at where are our graduates 4 years after they leave us, how we define success is changing, and those pathways to what is success are changing. So having an executive director who focuses on our IB, on our College Credit Plus, on our AP programs, but also on the data, the assessment, and our MTSS programs allows us this specific lens to be able to say, in each decision we make, are we setting our students up for success? So we're excited about that change that we're making in that specific area. Mrs. Marple will be our Director of Curriculum Instruction and focus on all of the curriculum and those needs and lead our coaches and our curriculum team and our ed tech. And the other change in this space would be Mrs. Venny in that Director of Community Engagement spot. So when we look at our administrative changes, and Mr. Boney referenced this, we've been able to make some changes and actually save senior administrative FTEs. Mr. McDonald left us to become the superintendent of the Marion Pleasant School District, and that position as a director has been filled by Mrs. Samantha Althouse, who has stepped in our HR department, is professional development in elementary elementary leadership. The position that Mr. Baker left has been filled by Mrs. Venny. We will not be replacing that specific role that was Mrs. Venny's. Those responsibilities will be shared by Dr. Bailey, by Lori Meese, and by the staff at Emerald Campus. When Dr. Hamilton left, that position had remained vacant. Those responsibilities will fall under Dr. Bailey and her new responsibility. We had Lynette leave us from HR. Erin Schulteis, who had been at the Virtual Academy, will step into that position. When we elevated Mrs. Ram to the Director of Technology position, it's not another new hire. So as we look at getting the right people on the right seats in the bus, we just wanted to clarify that these positions, we are mindful of the number of FTEs that we have in senior leadership positions. And this is like all of our gears need to work together, and we want to make sure that the spokes on the gears and the wheels are all aligned and working in the same direction. So we've had some changes, but haven't added people to our senior leadership team. We also want to share, as we look at our VBO and our culture playbook timeline, sometimes PD is a one-off, and sometimes PD is just a single event. We want to share with the board, we've shared this with our administrators, we share this with our teachers, that our intentional work with our culture playbook, and now with R Factor and with Relentless Leadership, there is a 3-year process, and it all is aligned and it all fits together. Starting last year around this time, we originally had Tim Kite come in and begin the work with a community group to create that culture playbook. Tim has addressed the board on multiple occasions. We've done R Factor training with our CO staff and with our building leadership. And next Tuesday, I'll be introducing R Factor at our 3 convocations. And those convocations will then lead to teachers training R Factor and being trained in R Factor during the next school year. Next school year, we'll be training our students in R Factor. We will then train our teachers in Relentless Leadership. This fall, the first 2 community coffees will be opportunities for me to share the culture playbook with our community, and we are putting together a short video that will be partially from those community coffees for folks who aren't able to attend one of those, to be able to see what our culture playbook is about and what we're talking when we talk about our core values. So we are being specifically intentional. We are putting together a aligned professional development program for our teachers and our students and our community, so that everyone knows what it is we're doing, how we're training, and there'll be opportunities for community members to follow along with that. As I shared in June, my third quarter goals, third quarter being July, August, and September, to continue the master plan work, our partnership with Planning Next. Part of that will be the community survey, which will include the master facility plan, the development of vision and mission statements. Secondly, that intentional focus on culture and communications. Our communications team, Mr. Starkey and Mrs. Venny, are working on how do we create a more streamlined website process. How do we allow for the documents that parents want to get to be the easiest for them to get to? We're also focusing a lot on messaging. We heard loud and clear from our PTOs that there are times they feel overwhelmed with the number of emails, messages, and how do we streamline that process so that people get the information where they are, when they want it, in an easy to digest fashion. So that communication and culture is a key process that we'll be working on. And then finally, professional development. Clarity in that professional development. Mrs. Schwanke will outline some of the things that we've done in the last week. My expectation is that principals lead their buildings. We may or may not have conversations about the middle school request to control cell phones by their own buildings. And some of our principals have said, we don't want cell phones out at lunch in their middle schools. I want principals to lead the buildings. And then accountability in those expectations. We want our principals to be our building leaders. We want them to lead their staff. We want consistency and clarity in the work that we do. So those are my kind of third quarter goals. And I think it's important that I share with you as a board what those are. Upcoming coffee events on August 17th here in the evening. We'll be over in the cafe again, 7 to 8:30. The first part of that will be about a 10-minute culture playbook presentation. Anyone who comes will provide a copy of the culture playbook and we'll run through that. I can do that in 10 minutes. I did that with each of our staffs when we did staff meetings. On September 20th, we're at the Dublin Chamber, 8:30 to 10. Again, we'll do culture playbook again for the first 10 minutes there. I know that we've heard from our community there are some folks who can make it to the evening, some folks who can make it to the mornings. So I want to be able to be balanced with the information that we provide. And then Tuesday, October 18th, we're back here at Emerald Campus for that third in the fall community coffee event. So we'll continue those. Got good feedback from the folks who attended those in the past. Any questions from the board?
Okay, it doesn't sound like there are any questions. Thank you for the thorough update. All right, I'll turn it over to Mr. Kern for treasurer update.
Yeah, I do want to follow up a little bit on the staffing discussion that we had from a financial standpoint is, if you remember my 5-year forecast update in May, we talk about the staffing plan and how we translate that into it. And that's what a lot goes into, 85% of what we do is salaries and benefits in the district. So very important planning component. So like right now, for example, we are planning for next year, whether it be growth positions due to student enrollment, the support because of additional IEP work and different other the intervention specialists or wherever, and take a look at that. So that way, as we go into the November forecast, we have everything planned for this year and the future years. You're more accurate the first year, and as you go out future years, it's a little harder to predict, but we do our best with that planning in mind. But it then allows our HR teams and then our buildings to be ready to go come January, February to get the best candidates possible with that. Chris talked about 4 kids moving in one day and different other things that they've gone through in the late stuff in April or May. And how do you deal with that? And really honestly, we've had, 2 new positions outside of our staffing plan. And so they do a pretty good job of planning ahead with that. And then there's sometimes you just do have those last minute and the numbers and the ratios get to that point where we do have to add staff. So it's not like we're not, we feel we're pretty well planned in that case and have them accounted for when we're looking at our forecast. But those situations do arise then where we need to meet the needs of our students, whether it be new staffing or services that we need to provide. So just kind of want to give a little update from our perspective on that. So as we go forward now, we're looking forward to, we'll get enrollment updates, our new and projection updates and everything else, and we'll continue to work from that as we move forward. As far as my agenda this evening, we do have 2 donations. We're always appreciative of our PTOs and our booster groups. They can provide to our buildings and supplement some what we provide, I say, as a district. Our first transfer is, I mentioned in my board update, is the normal athletics, safety school supplies, and pool fees, and that we help with our high schools who have to rent out the rec center and use those for their swim teams. And those amounts here we have not changed for a long time, so that's probably something we need to look at going forward. As I mentioned in my update too, number 2 is, the transfer number 2 is new, is our middle school athletic transfers. Something with Mr. Schwanke and our middle school ADs, and I think it was, as I mentioned in the email, very welcomed by our middle school ADs and our principals in that level, is where in the past our main fundraiser were magazine sales. A lot of work went into it, a lot of stuff went into it, not so much the work, and people are happy to do it, is just people don't buy magazines anymore, right? And so, I mean, I don't read it. Everything's on my phone if I'm reading it or on my laptop. So with that being said, we needed to find, and we had disparities in amounts and abilities to fundraise in certain, between the buildings and stuff. And so we had the ADs identify kind of what do they need, what was replacing those middle school fundraising within the magazine sales, and kind of also looking ahead too is what do you need from a capital perspective and different other things. So we, as Mr. Stark is working on his capital plans, for future years for PI, they need to be in contact and communication with him so we can properly plan in those different things. So I think it's a new way forward, and I think it's very welcomed at those levels, and it'll be work for us. And then the third one is our annual sinking fund. These are due to 2010, 2011 energy conservation bonds that we sold. Essentially what we're doing is setting aside monies to pay the principal that is due. We have one, it's like your mortgage, for example. It's almost like an interest-only loan that you're paying on, and then at the end you have one big balloon payment. This is the case, but we have to set aside each year per those bond covenants. And when I talk about the interest, I mentioned my board update. The federal government, or the IRS, reimburses us 94% of that interest every year. It was 100% when it was issued. They have reduced that over time, a few percentage points, as we have just 3 more years left in those cases, and then we'll pay off the maturity. But really, what we're taking with energy conservation, we did get savings. And we're using those savings to help pay off those debt that was issued. And it's not part of any of our bond issues that we've had voters pass. So this is outside of any voted debt and bond issues. And so it's just using those energy savings to help pay off those, along with the federal government subsidy and the interest costs to pay off that debt. Any questions?
All right, if there are no questions, it is recommended by the treasurer that the Board of Education approve item 7B, approval of transfer number 1, approval of item 7C, transfer number 2, 7D, transfer number 3, and 7E, the approval of the donations. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments? Okay, please call the roll.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
and Mr. Melody.
Yes, motion passes 3-0. Okay, Deputy Superintendent comments.
Okay, I will first go over the agenda items. The first one is the handbooks that we'll need board approval for. This is the second reading. Thank you, Mrs. De Silva, for catching a couple of errors today. And I also want to provide a little bit of clarification on the cell phone policy because it is a little confusing. The middle school handbook does have some language in there about high school. That's because the entire bit of language there is lifted from our administrative guidelines. So we didn't take it out because I imagined a parent saying, wait, I have a middle schooler, but it doesn't happen at the high school. So we just made that very clear in the language. And as Dr. Marshausen said, the intent there is to give principals the autonomy they need for what their schools and their students need. So those handbooks are on for your review tonight. The second thing on the agenda is the approval of district physicians. This is a repeat. We talked about this last year at about this time. The physicians that support our students and our student athletes are Dr. Whitehead. He is the head sports medicine physician. Dr. Hospital, Dr. Lafferty, Dr. Pietrapalo, and Dr. Shatkin, who you may recall came and did a visit in our district last year, was very well received. So they are on the agenda tonight for approval. Mr. Melody, should I pause there before the rest of my update for the vote, or should I keep going?
I'd say you can keep going.
Keep going,
Do your
okay.
update.
All right. Dr. Marshausen mentioned that we had quite a bit going on last week in terms of professional development and welcoming people back after our summer break. The first was Lead Dublin. This returned after a 2-year COVID hiatus, and it was incredibly inspiring. We had over 600 teachers come. They come on their own time. They just come to learn, and this is a really neat PD because it is put on by teachers and for teachers. We have 2 co-chairs and then a representative from each building who volunteers their time. And the sessions went throughout the day, and like I said, over 600 staff members came to learn with and from one another. The next 2 days were spent with our new teacher orientation. We had about 80 new teachers come. Due to a scheduling snafu, we were not able to have it at Scioto where we planned. We had it at Emerald Campus, and it was fabulous. It was really neat to welcome them to Emerald Campus, and we had breakout groups. We covered so many different topics that were really relevant to those new teachers. Then we rounded out our busy week with the administrative team retreat. We have had over 100 administrators come on Thursday for an all-day gathering, training, professional development with one another, and we covered things like curriculum, student services, HR, anything new that they needed to know. And we also did a lot of team building work and gave time to each building to develop specific goals for their building with support from the central office administrators. So that was last week. We'll see what this week brings. The final update I'd like to give you is about our Enrollment Center. I just want to publicly thank these group of ladies. They have moved their Enrollment Center to the former Tech House, which is just down from the preschool. And I'll just say it's not easy to work in this office. We have enrolled since January over 1,500 new students. We have withdrawn about that number too. And while the majority of those withdrawals happen during the school year at the building, in the summer, our enrollment office does process those. So they're very, very busy. We also have hundreds of address changes this time of year, all of which need processed and managed through a proof of residency. So enrollment in a public school district is very tightly and carefully monitored by Ohio Revised Code and by our own board policy. We have some families who come in and would like to be an exception. But because, as we've said tonight, Dublin is a destination district, we feel committed to the taxpayers in this district that the students who are attending our schools do in fact reside in our district. And we also have situations, very complicated stories of custody or transiency that we need to work through. So at times, our enrollment specialists are not treated gently, but I think they handle it with the utmost of professionalism. I'm very, very proud of them. This time of year, they need a few more pep talks than the rest of the year, and things really will smooth out in the next few weeks. But just the volume that they're dealing with right now, they're handling it beautifully. So any questions for me on any of those topics?
Just a question on the student withdrawal. What do you think? Can you give some driving factors for that?
Yes, we do actually have some schools with high transiency in our district. And I think every family's story is different. Every family's parenting arrangement is different. And so I think if we lined up 1,000 students and said, why did you withdraw? I think we'd get 1,000 different stories. We do have students who have been in 5 or 6 schools in 3 or 4 or 5 years. We also have families who come in kindergarten and they stay for the next 12, 13 years. So it really does depend, but I don't hear ever, not often for sure, and maybe never, of anyone leaving Dublin because they're not pleased with the schools. I think there's employment issues, housing issues, transfer issues that take our students out of our schools. They are still enrolling, and as we've said many times, the enrollments right now are primarily in the Northwest Quadrant. And so some of our enrollment at some of our other schools is actually down a little bit. DEP continues to grow. We'll give you a detailed report on that at our next board meeting.
Okay, thank you for the update. So it is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve item 9A, the approval of the 2022-2023 student handbooks, and 9B, approval of the district physicians. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, additional questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
and Mr. Melody.
Yes, motion passes 3-0. Okay, Chief Operating Officer comments?
Good evening. I have 2 resolutions for the board's review and approval tonight. The first one is we're recommending the attached resolution with Meta Solutions, and this is a cooperative bid for school buses. My first few years here, we did a bid on our own, and at most we got 2 people bidding. One time we only got 1 bidder. But by doing this cooperative bid with Meta Solutions, they do a large bid for multiple school districts. And not only does it give us a much better competitive price, but it actually gives us multiple manufacturers to pick from. And it's all been bid out. So our plan is, and there's no obligation with this resolution, the board is under no obligation to purchase. All this is just authorizing us to take part in the bid. If the bid works out well and if it fits our budgets, then we will be back in front of the board in just a few months for our 2023 purchase of new school buses. The next resolution is a little bit what we've been talking about tonight, as some of the academic reorganizations that are happening that you saw on the screen tonight, and as the different scopes and jobs, the moving of the new Enrollment Center, it's going to cause a little bit of construction work to make everything move around correctly. So what we're doing to keep this as efficient as possible is we already have a contract with Mark Ford and Associates for some general contracting work that the board approved earlier last month. And we're just going to make an addendum onto that for Mark to provide the designs for this for a competitive bid. And we'll be back in front of the board hopefully by October 1 or earlier with bid results for that bid work to be approved and get this done by end of calendar year. And that's all I have.
Jeff, do you want to just confirm we're good with modulars and ready to go at?
We are happy to report, especially Mr. Melody, after some of the questions and concerns you had. We shared some of those as well, but we were confident in the team. We officially turned over the modulars August 1st to the administration at Jerome. We actually finished them about 2 months ahead of schedule. A huge kudos to Kevin Klingler on our team, who really led a large effort on that. And no, those are open, ready to go. And I'm hoping to say in about 6 months how we're closing them as we get ready for the new additions, which are on schedule currently.
That's a great update. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so item 11C, it is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve 11A, the resolution for Meta, 11B, the approval of the resolution amendment number 1 for the contract design services for 2023 general contracting and central office additions. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, please call the roll.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
and Mr. Melody.
Yes, motion passes 3-0. Okay, Executive Director of Human Resources.
Okay, good evening again. I will start with our certified agenda tonight in the HR section. And starting out, we have 4 resignations since our last board meeting and 2 retirements. The retirements, Terry Fisher will be retiring from Wyandotte Elementary with 28 years in the district. And then Mick Neese will be retiring from Davis Middle School with 24 years in the district. We thank both of them just for their service. As it's already been said, we are almost fully staffed. We have 2 more intervention specialists to hire. But other than that, we did welcome 80-plus new teachers during new teacher orientation. You'll see 4 new hires on this agenda and 8 salary changes for your approval. There are 7 certified substitutes listed, and these individuals provide specialized support and services during the school year. And then there's an approval for payment for a summer IEP meeting. And then there's a leave of absence for Aaron Friedman. Aaron's going to be the administrative intern that will be shared between Riverside Elementary and Deer Run Elementary. You'll also see an attachment listing several teachers who will be paid for 6 periods of instruction for the coming school year. And then another attachment that has extended days for certified staff members. Those extended days cover time outside of the regular school work or school day, preparing for students to start and also closing down the year for summer. And then the last part of the certified agenda, there are a few salary changes for supplemental contracts, and then several athletic supplemental contracts for the fall 2022 season, and then pupil activity supervisor contracts, again, for athletics that cover the fall 2022 season. And then moving on to the classified agenda tonight, there are 9 resignations and 2 retirements on for your approval. The retirements, Judy Butterfield will be retiring from Glacier Ridge with 31 years of service in the district. And then from Brian's office, Val Shemos will be retiring from the treasurer's office with 15 years of service. We have several new hires on tonight. There's 22 on this agenda as we're trying to get ready for the new school year. And then there's 25 salary changes and then a final summer school request to finish out 2022. Moving on to stipends, there are a total of 21 stipends, so let me try to group those into different categories. 8 of these are various content leads in several departments in the academic areas in the district. 3 of them are corrections to DCS virtual in American history, where the amounts paid were originally listed as a semester course instead of a year-long course, and so those are corrections. The other 10 stipends are for programs that will ensure a smooth start to the school year, services and supports that students need to be successful, along with the stipend to pay those 80-plus new teachers for attending orientation last week. And that concludes the HR section. Any questions for me tonight?
I have a question. Maybe, I don't know, it might be for Chris, just about the student vaping workshop. Is that just for students who have a referral for that, or how are students chosen to participate in that?
Yeah, that one is mostly at the middle school level. We have the Insight, which is mostly for high school, but it's for referrals, students who may have been caught at school or something like that, but it's that way, okay?
Thanks.
There are times that for vaping and for other things, if we can provide a training or some sort of a clinic to go to, that we will trade suspension for those types of things to provide the needed support for our students before they get themselves either further into an addictive problem or to provide that support.
I have a question, and it may be for you, Brian, or for Dr. Marshausen. Just, it seems 21 stipend requests is a pretty hefty load, and I don't know if it's because I'm new. Is this typical for those with experience? If you could weigh in if this is typical, please.
I don't think the other districts I've served in have had this number of stipends for all these different activities. I think it's very much, and Mr. Melody smiled, I think it's part of how Dublin has always done business. But I do think Dublin probably is unique in this approach.
Yeah, I would agree too. My one other district, we didn't have very many stipends at all, so.
Yeah, I would say that it is typical for Dublin. I mean, every year we do see a high number of stipends like this. I will say, though, on my time on the board over the last 15 plus years, it has reduced over time, that we've been trying to consolidate, dwindle them down, and do away with some of them. So I think it's just an ongoing effort that we need to continue to focus on.
Okay, that's where I was going with that. That's where I was headed with that thought, is if there's a way for the board to ask the administration to evaluate some of these and see if there's a more transparent, a more clear way to go about some of these things, maybe putting it into, the teacher enrollment, or not enrollment, but teacher's description of their job description, or, some of these things I think we probably should look at and just try to find a more, an easier way for a board to look at these things. I think having all these on there as part and parcel of some other things is it's a little overwhelming.
And I think there are some of these that in previous districts, they may be supplemental contracts rather than stipend. So they would be, if a teacher had a contract, for example, our lead nurse. Our lead nurse gets a stipend to serve as lead nurse. I know in my previous district, there was a lead nurse who that's all that she did. So she might serve in an Emerald campus, but then was also lead nurse. So some of these things, we have folks who are willing to take extra responsibilities. Some of them could be supplementals. The challenge when you make them supplementals is if you attach them to their contract, they're always with their contract. And then some of these things, we probably need to take a look at how we're doing this. So we will be working with both of our associations through negotiations this year. And if this is something that the board would like us to discuss with DEA as we go through negotiations, I am sure DEA would be willing to have conversations about some of these positions and how we operate as a district.
All right, so if there are no other questions, it is recommended by the Board of Education, or it is recommended by the Superintendent, that the Board of Education approve items 13A, personnel action items certified, 13B, personnel action items classified, and 13C, stipends. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, please call the roll.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
and Mr. Melody.
Yes, motion passes 3-0. Okay, Director of Community Engagement.
Good evening again. The document that's going around is a requested document. It's a calendar of upcoming events for our school district starting this week and going through the end of October. There are a couple Dublin City community events thrown in there that are relevant to our district as well. You can let me know if there's any questions after you have a chance to look at it. Yeah, there's a lot on there. I'd love to share a little bit about some things that are happening. First, starting with Mr. Melody's comment and thanks at the beginning of this meeting for the Irish Fest, specifically to Mrs. De Silva and Ms. Rigby, who volunteered their time at that event. It was definitely a hot weekend, and it was filled with excitement for all of us, especially us new festival goers. Got to take it all in and work at our tent, handing out information to visitors about Dublin City Schools and sharing about all of the things we're proud of for our school district. It was a great way to connect with the community and meet a lot of new people. So thank you for your time there, and to our volunteers who staffed our tent all weekend. We had a convocation last week. It's a little different this year how we're doing convocation because our school's grown so much, our district's grown so much. So we're having 4, and the first one was last week at Scioto High School. We had several hundred members of our operations team and some of our central office support team who got to hear the first convocation. And we, thank you, Ms. Rigby was there, and we appreciate your time representing the board at that event. We will have 3 more convocations that are next week on the 16th, on Tuesday morning at each of our high schools. We're going to start at Scioto at 8 o'clock and then go to Kaufman at 9 and Jerome at 9:30. So there's going to be some lot of moving parts for that, and we're really looking forward to celebrating not once, but twice, 3 times, 4 times with our growing staffs. Our back-to-school efforts are underway. Today is when schedules started to become available for families. In grades 6 through 12, they're able to log on to Progress Book, and then there's an email that's gone out to families in grades K through 5 that'll let them know their homeroom teacher assignment. The process with our system to do this requires a little patience because there's thousands of messages going out, and there's a lot of information being shared. So we request patience on that, but it's starting. The excitement is in the air for all of the back-to-school efforts. There's also a recent change with our student email addresses. So you might hear, as people are figuring out how that works, this started on August 3rd, and it shifted from a student's graduation year being included in the email to having a number assigned, so it is a different email. Information has been shared about that. If anyone has any challenges, all of the buildings are ready to support families and their students in getting that figured out. So we would urge them to families to contact their school building for any support that's needed. And finally, I wanted to share this weekend, One Dublin has their annual back-to-school celebration where they provide backpacks and school supplies to any students that are in need. It does require pre-registration for this event, and at this time, they're full, but they have a wait list on their website. We appreciate their support. They've spent months gathering these supplies to hand out to students, and they have a drive-through process that happens at Indian Run United Methodist Church. But we're thankful for their partnership in supporting our students as we get ready to head back very soon. Any questions?
I just want to say thank you for the calendar. Very helpful. I do have a question about the email addresses, and I know students can ask this of their teachers or the building, but is there some kind of way for students to know other students' email addresses? I'm getting the question, like, how do I know what my classmates' email address is if I want to collaborate with them or what have you?
I'm not sure.
Because they used to just
Kelly
type in their
Ram?
names.
I see her.
Kelly?
She's back there knowing that answer right
Yeah.
there.
As an email, one way is that when a student in the 2 fields starts typing in the student's name, they'll see names pop up, and if they see more than one, they can open a detailed view, which shows that the student is, and I believe also the grade. So that's one quick way that
Okay.
they can get another student's email address.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the update. All right, items for board discussion or future agenda items. Are there any additional comments from the board?
Dr. Marshausen, I was just wondering if there is any further updates on parent participation for non-agenda items and where we are with that.
Well, at our last community coffee, folks were very complimentary of how things were at that coffee. I haven't had a single person contact me unhappy about what we've been doing with community coffees. Mr. Mel, I don't know if you have either.
Yeah, I have not received any direct communication asking for a change in public participation at the meetings, the way we're doing it. For items not on the agenda, I mean, that was kind of the direction we took back in springtime, to have it, just switch it to the community coffees. I would say that if maybe we want to do a change in the future, we could check with the other board members too, but my recommendation or preference would be we could take one of the community coffees and make that a board meeting, just have 3 or more board members there, open it up as a public meeting, and then just kind of either sit back and listen or sit back and participate, but we wouldn't have a regular agenda items that we'd be conducting business at that time.
Yeah,
That would be one recommendation.
if someone has concerns, I would say drop Scott and I, copy us if there's somebody who has concerns who doesn't feel like we're creating an opportunity for the board to hear public concerns.
Follow up on that, just for us. Do we have the signups for us yet for the coffees? Because I know there's one coming up on August 17th. We don't.
So you don't have a sign up for these yet? Okay, I'll have Janet share a Google Doc with those. And also then, as we look at the engagement meetings, if there's a second board member who wants to attend those engagement meetings as those come around, we'll add those for the remainder of 2022. So if anyone else wants to tag along at some of those.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we could almost use this event schedule that Christy just handed out and just add some additional columns, like board member 1, board member 2, and sign up that way.
Yeah, and
Instead of
at
having
public event,
multiple places to track.
at public events, if it's an event that the public's invited to, we can have 5 of you there, as long as we're not discussing board business. I think the legal conversation that we've had about the coffees is we could have 5 of you there, but then you wouldn't be able to talk. So that's kind of why we've kind of left it to 2, to try to have representation there for those events. But we'll add that, and then we'll also add those other events. Christy and I met today. One of the things that we're going to try to do for alignment and clarity purposes is to have some consistency at all those different engagement events, kind of a core message for each one. So if you're able to come to one, my part will be the same, but it's always interesting to hear the different perspectives from the different groups as we share the same message and how it's heard by different groups in such a unique environment.
All right, any additional comments from the board? So if we don't hear any, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Look forward to seeing everyone at